My name is April Ford. The story I'm going to share with you today is a story of abuse and how often we run from one form of abuse to another without sometimes even realize that we are in abusive situations. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in a poverty community. My father ended up leaving the home when I was 5 years old. My first taste in relationships or the opposite sex, it was at a very early age. I was first exposed to sex at the age of 14. I was pregnant by the time I was 15, so I was a teen mom. I had low self-esteem of myself. So the first young man that came along and made me feel pretty or feel special about myself, I gave him myself. And at the age of 17, I met Marco. Ever since my father had left that home at 5 years old, I always longed for that male attention. He would walk me to the bus stop at 6 o'clock in the morning and made sure that I got off to school. And I thought that he cared and, he really loved me, and I was great. When I came home from school, sometimes Marco had, dinner ready and things of that nature. I felt that this one was different. I was happy. I was in love. But however, that soon became one of my biggest nightmares. I can just remember walking into the house. I didn't know why Marco was upset. I didn't even realize he was upset. And Marco slapped me very hard. And I remember being shocked. He just hit me. Like, I couldn't believe that he hit me. That was my first encounter of physical abuse from a man. I didn't understand what was going on or even why this had happened. He believed that I was seeing someone else. He dealt with a lot of insecurities, which I was not. I don't even know what gave him that indication of that. I found myself through my tears and trying to figure out what my emotions were. I found myself beginning to comfort him because he followed that abuse with, or that slap with I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that. I'm having a bad day. I thought you was doing this. He had every excuse in the world. I began to nurture him. It's okay. I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that. I'm sorry you having a bad day. I forgot all about my pain and what he had just done to me. I was now focused on making him feel better because he seemed distraught about it. He seemed tearful. And I say seemed because it eventually happened again. And that became a normal process for me. He would abuse me, and then one encounter he abused me, and then he went in the bathroom and popped a whole bunch of pills as if he was trying to kill himself. And again, I found myself taking the pills out of his mouth, trying to nurture him, trying to make sure that he was okay. Again, not paying attention to me. It continued for a couple of years. I allowed him to hit me. At one point, I never fought back. One day I remember we were outside in Detroit off of 6 Mile, and we were waiting for his friend to come out of the community center. I'm not quite sure what the disagreement that we had was about, but I remember he slapped me so hard that I couldn't hear for a second out of my right ear. It got to a point where he dragged me across the floor one day. It got to the point where I began to fear for my life. I kept saying, I don't want to raise my children like this. And so at that point, I began to fight back. The interesting part is when I began to fight back, I didn't even think that I was in an abusive relationship, because now I'm fighting back. You're hurting me, I'm hurting him. I remember I did some crazy stuff. I remember putting nails in the bed because if he tried to do something, I'm going to stick him. I'm going to fight back now. He's not going to beat me anymore. I remember this one particular day, I pulled a 12-gauge shotgun on him because he had slapped me. And I had made an inner vow that he was not going to abuse me again. I did not want my children to witness, and this was not the life that I wanted. Thank God I knew nothing about shotguns because the safety was on. I remember a neighbor, my mom running to get the neighbor, and the neighbor came in and he knocked the gun out of my hand. But I was standing there and I was ready, because it was to the point, you're not going to keep doing me like this. You're not going to keep treating me. You're not going to keep hitting me and dragging me across the floor. You're not going to keep abusing me. At that time, I think I began to wake up and realize I don't deserve this. I'm a good person. I'm better than this. And number one, I did not want to raise my children like that. My children were little at the time, but I always know that what you allow your children to see is what they're exposed to, and maybe they will accept that for their life. And I didn't want that life for my children. I didn't want them to grow up seeing me beat on. So how I got out of that relationship, I remember going back to church, because my root was church, and it was a Catholic church that we were holding service in. And I remember sitting on the pew Sunday after Sunday, and I would say, Lord, if you provide a way of escape for me, I promise you I'll take it. I remember one particular day, we were riding in the car. It was Marco. It was four of us. It was two couples. And Marco was going through some things, and I was telling him that I didn't want to be in a relationship anymore, that I didn't want to do this anymore. And Marco jumped out of the car on us on the freeway. In between these couple of years, I married Marco at the age of 19. This particular day that he jumped out the car on the freeway with me, for the first time, I called the police. During the other rounds of abuse or bouts of abuse, I had never called the police. Even when I began to fight back, I never once had called the police. So this particular day, we called the police and the ambulance, and we ended up taking him to Detroit Receiving Hospital. And at that time, I don't know how it is now, but at that time, the spouse had to sign the person in. I went back, and I wasn't familiar with Receiving Hospital either, because my mom, I lived that, she sheltered me. Even though I lived in a impoverished neighborhood and things of that, like I wasn't the child that was always outside or running around the corner, or she had me in church, or I was at home or somewhere with her. So I was sheltered. I knew nothing about Detroit Receiving Hospital. So they took us there, and boy, was I panicked. They had him in a room, and he had the straitjackets on him. And he kept saying, if you don't sign the papers, I'll leave you alone. I promise you, I won't bother you. I'll leave you alone. I just don't sign the papers. And so, because again, I felt bad for him. I'm saving him again. In my mind, well, he said he gonna leave me alone, so he gonna leave me alone. So I did not sign the papers. He did not leave me alone. That very same night, he kicked in our back door, and we began to fight again. I'm still going to church, and I'm still asking God for that way of escape. Just show me how, because I didn't have any money. I worked, but I didn't have any money for that. I had enough to make ends meet. Marco got a call that his brother had been shot in Alabama, but his dad called and said, I need you to ride to Alabama with me, and we're going to be gone for a couple of days or whatever, depending on your brother's condition. He got down there. He said, I'm going to be down here about 2 weeks or so. You know, it don't look good, yada, yada, yada. And when that happened, it was a place, the house that I had, I owned that house. My aunt had gave it to us as a wedding present. They have these places around Detroit that say, we buy homes, we buy homes. And I sold him the house. The first offer he gave me, I took it. And it was $5,000. I sold him the house for $5,000. I relocated, new car, different phone number, stopped hanging out with the contacts. And that's how I escaped Marco's abuse. Now that I was free, I went back into another relationship. But this time, this relationship was different. The next person that would follow that relationship would be Caleb. Caleb was my best friend through it all, which means he knew about Marco. He knew about any other person I had dated. He knew when I was happy. He knew when I was sad. I knew all about him. I knew who he was before we decided to engage in a relationship. Caleb is the one that I end up with for the next 20 years of my life. And Caleb was the man that completely broke me. He broke me emotionally, financially, and spiritually. I had plenty of red flags before I married Caleb. For example, Caleb had stolen money from me. He had stolen from other people. He had a gambling addiction. He would promise myself and the kids trips. This one particular day, the kids were excited. We're going to Cedar Point. Friday came, payday came for Cedar Point, no money. Caleb had gambled the money away, as he often did. I worked, but my money went to bills. Caleb will work off and on the first couple of years, but a gambling addiction was so heavy and it was so strong that it broke us. I found myself trying to cover up, not only with friends and family, but with the children. That particular instance, he told the children that someone had broken into the car and stole his wallet. And Caleb he was an excellent liar. He had literally thrown a tire iron through the window. He would go all the way with the story. I knew, and I was able to discern that this is not what happened. He gambled the money away again. This is where I believe I felt safe, because now I know Caleb. I know he's not going to physically harm me. He's not going to do that. I trusted him. I ran from one form of abuse to another form of abuse. And at this time, I didn't realize that I was in an abusive situation because I wasn't being hit on. I only thought that abuse was physical. So since Caleb wasn't hitting on me, I was okay. And because I have always worked when I can pay my bills, I'm okay. Prior to us getting married, there were multiple rounds of infidelity. And I had forgiven him each time because I had convinced myself that, well, I know better. He's not my husband, and we really don't have a foundation to stand on. I would tell myself, I can't pray and ask God to bless this relationship that he hasn't ordained. I had convinced myself of that. And so Caleb decides that he wants to become a minister. He wants to be a preacher. And so the church, tells us, well, it's time for you guys to get married. Caleb never proposed for me. It was like, now looking back on it, it was almost like a business arrangement. We were sitting on the bed one day and just decided, yeah, let's get married. It's the right thing to do. I never had a proposal, an engagement. I never had that. Even with all the red flags, the gambling, the infidelity, the stealing, the multiple lies, because now he's in church and I'm expecting everything to be okay and everything to get better, I married him. And we were working hard and we were working in the church. And we decided that we wanted to move from the Detroit area, and we moved to Port Huron, Michigan. And in Port Huron, Michigan, we found another church home that we were comfortable with. Again, that pastor took a liking to Caleb and he enjoyed that church. In between this time, Caleb was not employed. He had lost multiple jobs. He had decided, well, maybe going back to school was best for me. So I carried the weight of the household. But while we were at the church and we were youth leaders, one particular day, it was offering. And there was a young lady that was in the youth that I happened to look at her and I looked at him at the same time. And my woman's intuition kicked in just by watching the way that those two had exchanged eye contact. I knew something. I didn't want to accuse him, and I wanted to believe that things were getting better. About a week later, there was a knock on the door. There was another young woman at the door. I did not know this woman. I was about approximately 30 years old. She was approximately 18 or 19. She was a child to me. She knocked on my door and she said, "Are you Miss April?" I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "I want to talk to you about something, and I feel that it's something that you need to know because you work with the kids in the community. Everybody loves you, and I just feel like you don't deserve this." And so at that time, she proceeded to tell me that Caleb was cheating with this young girl, and she was in the youth department with us. And I was devastated. Sometimes we want God to just fix everything. We want him to take, Caleb is not going to do this anymore. God just took him away, took that part of him away. And it doesn't work like that. And so, Caleb tried to lie and deny it, but he couldn't. The young lady, she brought too much evidence because she had walked in on them being intimacy. So she knew or seen things that when she spoke it, I knew that you're telling the truth. Of course, I confronted him and, he denied it until he couldn't deny it. I didn't say anything to the pastor. I didn't even know what to do. I convinced myself that even with the young lady that he was cheating with, I spoke with her. I forgave her because after all, I have kids almost your age. And I know this young lady, by working with her in the youth department, she had already had a bad reputation of sleeping around. She had a reputation where they were accusing her of being on. She had some issues going on. And I could not find it in my heart to be upset with her because I was used to it from him. It was almost like I was hoping that you wouldn't do this again, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I expected you to do this again. And he did it. And so with the young lady, even after that, I treated her with respect. She needed some help with her child. She was losing her children. And so I helped her with her children. I helped her financially. I never mentioned anything about it to the pastor or the church because I didn't want to embarrass my husband. I wanted to protect him. And I'm still trusting God that everything is going to be okay. All while I am hurting inside, like I'm crying, I'm devastated. But at the same time, I'm trying to do the Christian thing. I'm trying to do what's right. And after all, if I forgive him, then I have to forgive her because it's not her fault. She was a child to us. What led to the end of the relationship? We eventually moved back to the Metro Detroit area. And there were a couple of things that ended this relationship. It took a minute. One of the things was I had found out that this same young lady, we hadn't spoke to her in years. And I found out through a mutual acquaintance that this young lady had and died. And I felt so responsible for her, even though I knew I had done right by her and I showed her love, but I was connected to him who didn't do right by her. And I would ask myself, what if we were supposed to be that different couple or that motherly or even auntie couple to her that showed her different, that brought her out? And I remember telling him, hey, did you know that this young lady passed? Did you? No, I didn't know she passed, but I knew she was strung out. I seen her at a such and such store one day and she looked bad. That was his response. I'm crying. I'm hurt because I was concerned about her soul. And his response was none of that. And in that moment, I don't want to be connected to you anymore. And that tore my heart up to find out that this young lady had passed. And not only did she pass, but she passed of a. And what if we were supposed to be? I say we because you're taught in church once you're married, you become one. So what if we were supposed to be the people that showed her something different? I couldn't take the chance of that happening again. The next thing, Caleb had a son, and his son was approximately 12, around the time between 12 and 13 years of age. Caleb's son calls and says that his stepfather threw him up against a brick wall. Caleb was a licensed CPL holder, and he'd always carried his weapon, and so he went down there to see about his son. In the midst of seeing about his son, Caleb and the stepfather gets into a shooting match. Caleb ended up shooting the stepfather, and he died. I went through court with Caleb. I funded that. I paid for that. We went through this approximately three-year trial. They ended up sentencing Caleb to 4 years because they felt though the other guy pulled a gun on him as well. They fought him because you should not have went down there. That was not your home. And so they ended up reducing it, and they gave him 4 years. I was embarrassed behind that. And it took me a long time to admit that. I was embarrassed because you were a man of God. You knew better. I was hurt yet again. I went through court. I sat through court. I held him up even when he was in jail. During this time, Caleb had begun, he was no longer a minister, now he was a pastor. We didn't have a very large congregation, about 12 or 15 people, but he was yet a pastor. I took on the responsibility of the ministry when he went in. This was during COVID. It was hard trying to preach and carry people through COVID. We were on the phone 3 or 4 times a day, every day, praying and, trying to encourage them through COVID. My son and I were going to shelters, dropping off food and doing what we could do. All of this to represent the God in us, the ministry, and him still as the pastor. But during that time of his incarceration, he still couldn't show me any respect. He was still mishandle me as far as the way he talked. If I couldn't get to the phone fast enough, it was, what were you doing? You should always have your phone on. You never know when I'm going to call. And, I'm important and I'm this. It was that narcissistic behavior. And at the time, I was not familiar with narcissistic behavior. I had to do some research to find out what's really going on. It got to the point to where one particular day he called and we had been yelling over the phone. And when I got off the phone with him, my daughter was there. And I was talking to her and I was telling her, I'm tired. I can't keep doing this. My daughter left. As soon as she left, she called me on the phone. And we're talking on the phone and she gets home and we're still on the phone. And all of a sudden, the phone goes silent. I can't say anything. I can't talk. I hear her saying, Mom, 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 but I can't respond. I made it to my kitchen counter and I put my head down on the kitchen counter. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And I remember saying, Jesus, Jesus, this is in my mind. And then it eventually started coming out my mouth. I'm going to be okay. Jesus, but I was laying on my counter with my head tilted like this. When I came back to, I got the phone and my daughter said the ambulance should be coming through the garage in a minute. She had given them the garage code for them to come in. They took me to the hospital. I was diagnosed at that point of having a TA. Eventually, we learned that after I went through all the testing and seeing a neurologist, it wasn't a TA, but it was a severe anxiety attack. And when I realized that the stress of this marriage, the weight of this marriage was bad for my health, I chose me. I wanted to live. I wanted to be free. I didn't want any more pain. And that's how it ended with Caleb. I wrote my book, From Abuse to Abuse, by April 4th. I did some research. I did some healing this time. I am currently dating the same man for the last 2 years. No physical abuse, no emotional abuse. I didn't even know that it was possible to be this happy and stress-free in a relationship. I didn't know it was this possible because I never seen it and I didn't have it.